Welcome to this session of Loose Talk About Physics. Today I'm going to elaborate on the human equation. As some of you know, this looks like a heart function, something that if this is our brain is produced, a signal is produced and maintained in this part of the brain stem called medulla oblongata. Here everything is maintained, our bodily functions are maintained by autonomous nervous system, which is kind of a nervous system that works without our interference, without our surveillance. It's supposed to be there and keep us functioning without our concern. It has not always been so. Let's go a few billion years ago. This kind of, when the heart was about to be invented, this kind of function or periodicity was under scrutiny, and many living beings were competing for this kind of knowledge and function and anatomy and physiology. So some of us developed a heart, and we left it, and around us it has been peace among several kinds of species that have a heart. So it could be lowered and its function controlled by a lower part or a more early part of our brain. So today it's just there doing its function. But the brain is layered, as some of you know. The primitive brain is sitting inside, and layers go out to the big brain we have today, where some of our most daring and consuming parts of our brains exist here, actually here in the frontal part of the brain. I imagine that from this the point in the brain where heart is controlled and respiration and something like that, and through all those layers there are some persons who have use their lower parts of their brains more often than the more advanced part, the outer layers. Actually, I have derived a periodical B. Who is closer to autonom than periodical A. And let's say which is lower than periodical B for maintenance and control by a mammal, let's say, is a minion or an animal. An animal is more interested in, let's say, the smell of the feces and everything like that. We don't consider that as important. So lower than B, minion animal, closer to where this ancient battle for the technology of the heart was fought by biological beings millions and years ago and millions of years ago. And we have something in between here, which says between alpha and beta, and there are numerous kinds of layers that define a human. And what's over alpha we can call superhuman, because it's more than the outermost sophisticated layer of our brain. So I call this a parallel coupling. And what I'm going to say now is pretty amazing, because let's say there is a number between alpha and beta. Let's say that an animal uses some kind of parallel computing between where alpha is falling into a category where x1 is greater than x2, so that a person using x1 uses more parallel thinking, parallel computing, so and sometimes it's serial coupled, so that those layers who normally do parallel computing, like the heart is doing its job without interference from another periodical between beta and alpha, that costs less than so when x is if we rely upon so some people use more energy because they're aware of things that shouldn't be considered something that you could control, should be a part of the autonomous system. Actually, but I have discovered that I don't. I care about those little things that seems periodical, and my theory is also that it can be stored by dynamical storage, as in movements and synchronicity by neighbors, for example, going in and out of the front doors. It's more likely that people in a neighborhood will live in synchronicity, some clock, which defeats loneliness and things like that. That your neighbors are predictable, and in that predictable pattern, this dynamical predictable pattern where people walk in and through their doors, it's possible to store information by dynamical store a pattern for dynamical in and out from the doors, for example, in a neighborhood. Stores emotions and things like that. Also, here in my pictures here, emotions can be stored. It can translate to different kind of actions, consciousness, way of life, and things like that. As I mentioned in an earlier film, a key, a sort of key to habits, and if you have many tasks to this, those kind of storage, as if you give an instruction by unconscious or to those periodicals close to the heart, which is autonomous. If you have something you want to convey through those lower layers of the brain, those animal-like or almost, you can do that, but it will cost, because you have to feed more energy into those lower layers. And people who use those outer layers of the brain is less, it weighs less on them than people who has to use more of those.